So let's get started.
Yes, let's jump right into this game between James Maney and Phil Wynn. James leading out with Hatterene and Indeedee. And let's see what Phil decides to use. Weavile and Weezing.
All right,
Neutrals and gas hitting the field.
Yeah, so exciting to see that. That is actually one of the ways to shut down Hatterene and Indeedee. Now you can't take advantage of that Psychic Terrain and go for Expanding Force. So Weezing, once again, not a Pokemon we see very often, but shutting down the Psychic Terrain coming out from Indeedee. It's actually going to be that Dynamax coming out from Weavile as well, so a lot of offensive pressure immediately on turn one. Of course, one play that James can do to get around this is potentially just something like a Follow Me Trick Room on the first turn. Depending on what the rest of his Pokemon is, I think this is still a decent position for him if he has, slower Pokemon in the back. But it looks like it's actually going to be a Dynamax coming out, so putting on some more offensive pressure. And if you can't set up the terrain through Indeedee, well, you can always through it through Hatterene as well, though in this position of G-Max Smite is also a very strong option.
Yeah, so pick Pokemon already for both Phil and James. But it is really interesting that James is going to go ahead and use the Gigantamax already, with Indeedee using Follow Me, going to take away that offensive pressure from its partner as Weavile goes for the Max Darkness. And Indeedee doesn't take that one too well. Will be a clean knockout there. And the special defense for Hatterene going to fall. For Sludge Bomb to hit, and that does a significant amount of damage. But Hatterene goes for the Max Mindstorm here onto the Weezing, wants to take it out immediately and does just that. Able to remove that Galarian Weezing from the field and set up the terrain.
That was an incredibly fast-paced turn one. Both players trading knockouts left and right. And once again, I mean, we're seeing a Dynamax Weavile out on the field. I think just the combination of Weavile and Weezing is not something we've really seen at all throughout the series. So very exciting to see that this Weavile is putting on a ton of offensive pressure. And so, yeah, surprised that, James didn't commit to the Trick Room option, but perhaps if the Hatterene wasn't Focus Sash, he was worried about the combination of Max Darkness and Sludge Bomb. So Porygon now a pretty good Pokemon defensively. One play you could make here on James's end is simply just go for a Max Guard on the Hatterene and maybe a Trick Room. Phil could maybe read into that double up onto the Porygon, but one of the reasons why Porygon is so good in this format is because it's very difficult to knock out, even if you potentially go for a double up onto it. So I think James clearly opting for a Trick Room team, and whereas Phil's team is a little bit more fast-paced. So even though James wasn't able to get Trick Room up successfully on that first turn, I think he's still able to go for a relatively safe Max Guard Trick Room here. Phil could, of course, try to double up into the Porygon, maybe pick up a knockout, but I think it's unlikely that even a double up will knock out Porygon because it's just such a bulky Pokemon. But, oh, no Max Guard. It's actually an ally switch.
Well, that's one way to potentially protect Hatterene as Weavile does go for Darkness, but it's Hatterene that takes it, and it survives!
Yeah, it survives, but still takes up a lot of damage. I think, James was hoping for the double up here. And yeah, the double up goes into the Porygon slot, so Phil expecting a Max Guard there. And James gets punished really heavily, losing his Gigantamax Pokemon immediately. And yeah, I mean, I have to wonder if there was no Trick Room on the Porygon, because I felt like Max Guard Trick Room was just the super safe play there. Even though that, Phil, predicted that. I still don't think a double up is even knocking out Porygon, but I guess one thing that James might have been worried about was something like a Max Knuckle and an offensive Arcanine with that increased attack stage going to Flare Blitz into the Porygon. So, Ally Switch, not something you see super often on Porygon. It wants to run Trick Room, Recover, and then two attacking moves like, Tri Attack, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt. Azumarill is the last one, but Weavile will get one last Max move off here. So, Ally Switch not working out there very well.
No, but Porygon 2 is able to take that Max Darkness really handedly, and that is going to allow Porygon 2 to stick around for just a little bit longer as Arcanine goes for the Will-O-Wisp, but Azumarill avoids the attack. Azumarill gets to go for a Play Rough here, and Weavile barely hangs on. Even after that super effective attack, Porygon 2, because it was able to survive, gets this Trick Room off as well.
Yeah, that's a big turn there. I mean, missing Will-O-Wisp onto Azumarill makes it a lot tougher. Azumarill now actually maybe a prime Pokemon to sweep under Trick Room. Phil has relatively speedy Pokemon out on the field, you can very easily just go for a water type attack into Arcanine with the Azumarill. Porygon can easily target the Weavile. So despite James losing his Dynamax / Gigantamax Pokemon so early on in this game, this is the pressure of Trick Room. Azumarill is one of the best Trick Room sweepers, even as a non-Dynamax Pokemon. I don't know what item it has yet, but often see something like an Assault Vest or Life Orb, for example. So yeah, I think right now, James actually in a really commanding position because of that Will-O-Wisp miss. Even if the Will-O-Wisp connected, I think it's still pretty tough because Phil just doesn't have much damage at this point.
Yeah, all of that damage, unfortunately. With whoa, what is this? That is a Steel Roller coming out and removing the terrain on the battlefield as Porygon 2 for James goes for the Tri-Attack into Arcanine. Does a little bit of damage there, but gets the freeze!
Yeah, I'm surprised that James opted to go for like that target selection. I think it made more sense to target down the Arcanine with a water type attack there, just because the Arcanine's Will-O-Wisp, you really don't want your Azumarill to get burned. Steel Roller is a really cool option on Azumarill to not only do a lot of damage, but also get rid of the terrain. It's obviously a very unfortunate freeze onto the Arcanine. It's one of the many reasons why Tri-Attack is a very strong attack. So I think for James at this point, you have the Porygon Mirror. You just want to knock out the Arcanine, and Weavile's one attack away from getting KO'd as well. So just pick up knockouts and then force the 2v1 with your Porygon and Azumarill against those lone Porygon.
Azumarill goes for another play rough, and Arcanine able to hang on and put itself in its berry range, so will be able to heal up just a little bit with the Agua Berry, but Tri-Attack again into the Arcanine, and does not get a chance to hang on because it's a critical hit. So even if that Arcanine was able to unthaw, it's not going to be able to do anything this turn, as Phil's Porygon 2 going to go for the recover here, bring itself back up to full, allow itself to stick on the field for just a little bit longer as Weavile has to come back out in Arcanine's place.
Yeah, Phil definitely not having the rules go in his favor. I think James, surprised to see him not go for a water type attack there last turn. Perhaps he doesn't have something like Liquidation and Waterfall and only has Aqua Jet. I think that critical hit actually also secured the knockout on Arcanine, where if you don't get that crit, then at least Arcanine potentially has a chance to thaw out, maybe go for a burn onto Azumarill. So because, as you saw, Phil's Porygon was able to get that special attack boost, I think this was a game actually in which Porygon maybe could have 2v1'd if Azumarill gets burnt there, but it's really tough to win this now.
Yeah, Aqua Jet does come out and will secure the knockout onto Phil's Weavile. And the Tri-Attack now comes out from Phil's Porygon 2 just to do some damage to James's, but it survives.
Yeah, there's a lot of damage there, though. I mean, this is why Porygon is a really impressive Pokemon. I mean, it is a 2v1 now, so, and Porygon's often have recovery. You also have to play around Ally Switch, although I don't think that's super relevant right now. And there is the Liquidation, so yeah, I'm surprised Azumarill wasn't going for that earlier. I felt like James could have just gotten more free damage off, but now, yeah, the question is whether Phil's Porygon from 2v1 has that special attack boost, but Porygon 2 on the opposing side is just able to heal all that damage consistently.
Yeah, even though that it's a lot of a crit comes out for the Tri-Attack, so that actually eliminates James's ability to bring that Porygon 2 back up to full with Recover. Is this Tri-Attack going to be enough, though? It's kind of coming down to the wire.
Yeah, and I mean, Azumarill, if it only is using Liquidation as the strongest attack, I think Porygon will actually be able to pull this off. So let's see, it's a lot of damage from Tri-Attack. Here's another Liquidation. I mean, Phil's Porygon has Recover, so I think he should actually be able to clutch this out through a combination of Recover. But there's a defense drop as well. That's huge. Oh my god.
Yeah, that is huge. It kind of forces Phil to have to use Recover here in order to bring itself out of range of getting knocked out. But James is able to fire off another attack here as it goes for another round of Liquidation.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think, you called it exactly right. If the defense drop doesn't come out that turn, then you should just be able to try attack twice more and win. But now you have to recover every turn slowly so that you don't get KO'd by something like Liquidation and Aqua Jet. And now with James going for Liquidation every turn, you've increased chances of obviously getting defense drops. You can crit at any point as well. I think another defense drop would really just spell out doom here for Phil. And so I mean, yeah, I think Phil realizing that, hey, I can't stall out the liquidation, is just going for the Tri-Attack. He's gonna either need a high damage roll or maybe a critical hit or a status condition. Let's see if Tri-Attack's able to do enough. It's not.
Ooh, it's not. The liquidation comes out from James's Azumarill, but Porygon 2 hangs on.
Yeah, it hangs on. So the
Are we
question
gonna go
now
for the
is whether
recover here?
Yeah, can it take an Aqua Jet? Let's see. Here's the Aqua Jet coming up from the Azumarill. Defense drop from the Porygon, and it is not enough. Oh my goodness, what just happened?
What a really down to the wire finish for this game 1 between James and Phil. I really kind of expected when you set up the win condition there that Phil might have been able to take it, especially after knocking out James's Porygon 2.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I felt like, Phil obviously got very unfortunate in that game. Did get a big critical hit onto the opposing Porygon, but I felt like actually if Phil just connects on that initial Will-O-Wisp onto the Azumarill, the Porygon on his end probably is just able to 2v1 at that point because Azumarill's not doing enough damage even with defense drops. The Porygon on the opposite end has the special attack increase as well, so a lot of things not going in Phil's favor there, and I mean, yeah, just that was a really fast tempo game as well. I was surprised once again that the Azumarill was opting to go for like Steel Roller and play rough instead of just going for Liquidation onto Arcanine, probably predicting some Protects or Switch outs, but I felt like Liquidation was just such a safe play into Arcanine because Arcanine's partner was never really threatening that much, and ultimately, yeah, I think if that first Will-O-Wisp connects, then that most likely seals up the game for Phil's end because, yeah, the Porygon's just able to do so much damage to Tri-Attack. So, I think while unfortunate, Phil can at least come out of that game and be like, I got very unfortunate. I'm not sure there were that many other plays that he could have made differently. And I felt like he played well. He understood the matchup and realized that, hey, Trick Room is probably going to go up. But I think, if anything, that game highlights how, despite Phil having Porygon 2, which is typically not a very offensive Pokemon, it actually can be really good offensively, especially in that, 2v1 endgame against Porygon and Azumarill. So I think going to this next game, I think the Weavile Dynamax made a lot of sense just to put on pressure. I think Phil probably accepts that he's not going to be able to deny the Trick Room, so his goal is to just distribute as much damage as possible. And I would have liked to see a Trick Room come out a little bit earlier in that last game. I felt like the Ally Switch wasn't really necessary. Could have gone for just like a Max Guard Trick Room there. So there were some safer plays to be made on the opposing side.
Well, let's find out what's going to happen in this game 2. We are at match point already. James, if they take this game, will take the series, but still has a chance to come back here, playing very, very well by bringing the Galarian Weezing the first time, and might prove to be necessary here as James does bring the Hatterene and Indeedee, but Phil switches it up, brings out the Arcanine and Porygon 2 immediately.
Yeah, so different lead this time around, realizing, hey, Weavile is pretty frail, it's going to go down pretty easily, and I think Phil maybe recognizing that, James, had he made some safer plays, would have been able to have a far better advantage. And so, Porygon out here pretty defensive, but there is the threat of Expanding Force coming out immediately, right? Like, Phil has Snarl to decrease the special attack, he can potentially reverse Trick Room with his Porygon, get some damage with Fire Attack, but I don't know, like, the tricky thing here on James' end is do you click Trick Room on this first turn, out of fear that Phil might reverse the Trick Room immediately. You could just go for something like a double Expanding Force just to get some damage off on the board, and try to bait Phil into going for that Trick Room. You could obviously go for something like a Follow Me or a Trick Room, but I think in this position, Hatterene isn't really threatening that much offensively, so James definitely has options. You never want to really take a Snarl, especially with two special attackers, but the upside for James is that there's not much offensive pressure coming out from Phil's end right now.
Yeah, we'll see what James decides to do for this first turn of the game, as Snarl comes out from Phil's Arcanine, and Indeedee goes for the Expanding Force here. Gonna connect with both Pokemon and does a decent amount of damage to both. But you can see how that drop kind of mattered in terms of how much damage ended up coming out as Trick Room from Hatterene.
Yeah, so James committing to like Trick Room anyway, not really worried too much about Phil potentially reversing the Trick Room. If Phil had gone for that Trick Room, it'd actually be in a really sweet spot where you can get another Snarl off. With that critical hit on Indeedee, actually did a lot of damage as well. But Phil Porygon isn't really in much threat, so you could pretty easily reverse the Trick Room right now. Even a double Expanding Force won't pick up the knockout onto Porygon. However, it might potentially KO the Arcanine or anything that switches in, so it's a pretty tricky spot because, yeah, Arcanine's really at risk of just maybe getting knocked out here. And with the nature of Phil's team, you know, like, the Weavile is really what really wants to come out and do as much damage as possible, but a hyper-offensive team, or team revolving around maxing Weavile is pretty tough, so it looks like Phil's actually going to commit to a different option here. Not something we see very often, but, you know, is a possibility a lot of players sometimes think about, and that's Dynamaxing Arcanine. This is a pretty defensive Arcanine as well, so doing it really to stick around on the field for a little bit longer, recognizing, hey, I've already chipped away a little bit on James's end, then I don't really need, like, the most offensive Arcanine to pick up knockouts at this point. So really interesting decision.
We're seeing a lot of different Pokemon in the meta right now getting that Dynamax factor, but double expanding force here, just chipping away at those health pools as Max Flare comes out now into James's Indeedee, able to get the knockout. And we'll see how much damage Porygon is able to do.
Yeah, so the Dynamax on the Arcanine now allows it to survive the double expanding force, and Porygon is able to successfully reverse the Trick Room. So yeah, this is a really cool example of how you should always keep your options of Dynamaxing flexible, right? Phil decides to actually commit Dynamaxing Arcanine, realizing, hey, Weavile, even if I reverse Trick Room, still going to be in a pretty tough spot because of that Porygon. But the advantage for James this time around is that he does have the potential to, you know, go for a Dynamax on the Hatterene, might even want to switch out, might want to Dynamax that Azumarill in the back. Porygon's also taken a lot of damage, so probably going to want to try to recover off at this point. As you see, Phil opting for the Max Flare and recover, a pretty safe play. I really have to wonder if the Hatterene here can potentially take a Max Flare in the Sun, because, you know, if it Dynamaxes, it surely will be able to, but even if it doesn't Dynamax, like, you know, Arcanine looks like it's still a pretty defensive variant. I think you really need to keep your Porygon out on the field if you're on Phil's end, just to heal back. So let's see if Max Flare is enough to actually pick up the KO during the Hatterene.
Oh, no, it's not enough. As Porygon 2, as we saw before, is going to get the chance to get the recover off. But Hatterene surviving is really big here, as Hatterene gets a chance to go for another expanding force, just again chipping away at those health pools for both of these Pokemon. But with the recover from Phil's Porygon 2, it does bring it out of range of getting knocked out, as James's Porygon 2 opts to reset the Trick Room. So Trick Room War is happening now.
Yeah, James clearly playing for an end game where he wants to stall out Phil's Dynamax and potentially sweep with that Azumarill. You know, Azumarill is the last Pokemon in the back. So the goal basically is, this time around, you know, your Porygon isn't doing as much damage. I've effectively stalled out your Trick Room. I'll have the Trick Room advantage. And what I love about seeing two Pokemon knowing Trick Room is, yeah, whether either player calls it correctly and, like, reverses Trick Room on the correct turn. Expanding Force comes out here, and Arcanine survives with 1 HP, but a double will knock it out.
Yeah, that would have been a clutch survival there had that Porygon 2 from James's side not gone for the tri-attack just to be able to get the knockout. But Porygon 2 reverses the Trick Room once again.
It's the classic, you know, how to shut down Trick Room, just use your own Trick Room. And Porygon being, you know, one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the game, especially with that Eevee, it's so difficult to knock out, so allows Weezing to come in for free. However, James's Porygon has not taken any damage yet, but Phil has that taunt on the Weezing, a very, very clutch attack. One thing you can do right now is just taunt the Porygon, try attack onto the Hatterene, and go from there, right? The Porygon on the opposing end can't go for Trick Room or recover. It's not doing much damage either, so I love the Weezing bring here, I think. Able to put on a lot of pressure, and Phil actually, you know, has that Shadow Ball as well, which is super effective against the Hatterene. I think could guarantee the knockout onto that slot. So that taunt's a really big deal. However, of course, Phil doesn't have Dynamax anymore. James still has Dynamax, and I'm really wondering, how do you deal with something like a Dynamax and Azumarill in the back, because that's going to be able to put on a lot of pressure, and I think it starts with recovering with the Porygon after this turn.
But Porygon 2 goes for the Ally Switch. Whoa! Gonna be able to switch places with Hatterene on the opposing field, as now Weezing taunts the Hatterene, which is not the target that it wanted to be able to connect with. So now it is going to be the Tri-Attack that comes through. Hatterene does get knocked out here, but James's Porygon 2 is still up and kicking.
Yeah, that was a great play by Phil, actually. So predicting the Ally Switch, the taunt, you know, in that position, you could obviously just go for like Trick Room with a Hatterene as well. Also surprised to see that it's not Magic Bounce, but some players opt to not run Magic Bounce out of fear from, you know, Parting Shot and Incineroar. So, yeah, Phil covers the Ally Switch option by doubling up into the slot and probably gets the best end of the trade-off. You know, now you still have to deal with, like, Taunt is so good, but you still have to deal with the potential mind games of another ally switch. One thing James could do here is just go for another ally switch, Dynamax the Azumarill, and then go for like Max Steel Spike onto the Weezing. If that's enough to pick up a knockout, you know, then it's going to be really tough, I think, for Phil to be able to win this. And the main reason for that is that Phil just doesn't have that much damage out on the field right now. I think that is kind of just one of the key problems of Weezing. However, in this case, at least, it has that super effective Sludge Bomb against Azumarill, but this is the perfect time for Azumarill to Dynamax. Weezing at least is able to shut down abilities right now, but I think a double up, yeah. I mean, here it's interesting. Do you go for the ally switch on the Porygon, or do you just double up onto the Weezing slot and try to pick up a knockout onto it? We'll have to see, because the taunt will at least make the Porygon a little bit less useful.
Let's see what James decides to go for, as it is going to be that taunt again from Phil's Weezing, this time finding its mark onto the Porygon 2 on James's side, and a recover. So nice safe play coming out from Phil, just to make sure that the Porygon 2 is nice and healthy. But time for James to attack, and James goes for the Max Steel Spike that we got a chance to see from the Steel Roller before. Weezing gets taken down to a little bit below half from that one attack coming out from this Azumarill. But what did this Porygon do to try to do? And it was going for the Trick Room. It can't use it now after the taunt.
Yeah, so Phil, at least gets a pretty good end of that trade-off. He actually has the Rotom in the back. I think that's actually the perfect Pokemon to have as the last one to potentially deal with Porygon and Azumarill. So, yeah, I think, Phil had two potential plays he could make here. I was thinking he could maybe just, stay in with the Weezing and sacrifice it, stall out the Dynamax. Instead, the risk is now you switch in the Rotom. You also now activate Azumarill's ability, and Porygon gets the download boost as well, and it is going to be that special attack increase. So I feel like that risk was a little bit switchy because, or a little bit risky, not switchy, because your main win condition at this point, I feel like, is that Rotom. Now you've got Azumarill out. If the Rotom gets targeted here, it's going to spell really, really bad news for Phil.
Oh, it's going to be the Porygon 2 that takes that tri-attack, but let's see where this Max Steel Spike goes, and goes into the Rotom. Ooh, takes a good chunk of damage, but not too bad.
Yeah, good chunk of damage, is able to survive. The defense boosts don't really provide any value for James right now either. However, Phil is still staring down a Dynamax Azumarill on its last turn, and he doesn't have Protect on the Rotom. And this is exactly why I would have liked to see Phil stall out the Dynamax first and then go from there. As Porygon also has 2 increased stages of special attack as well, so it's doing so much damage with tri-attack. So, yeah, I mean, you can see just how much of a factor download actually plays from both Porygons. I think Porygon actually may be the most important Pokemon in the matchup for both players here, outside of the Dynamax Pokemon. So I think what's really tough for Phil now is that he's just going to take so much damage, and without the ability to protect on the Rotom and Tri-Attack doing so much damage, Rotom is just really, it gets a nasty plot off here, but is it really going to be able to stay on the field? Like, James has to respect it this turn, right?
Yeah, James has to do something about that Rotom, but Tri-Attack comes through onto the Galarian. Weezing that just switched in does get the knockout. That leaves Azumarill free to go after this Fan Rotom, but a special attack increase again for James's Porygon 2, as the Max Geyser now getting shown from Azumarill. And nope, even after that one nasty plot, it's not going to stick around on the field long enough to be able to use it.
Yeah, and you don't ever really see this, right? Download is normally an ability that activates once, and you stay on the field on the Rotom. With the Porygon, you switch it out. You can maybe give it a boost, but in this game, Porygon got 3 boosts. Like, it's at +3 special attack right now, so if anything, Phil's Weezing actually worked against him at the end of the day, specifically because of this Porygon interaction. This is one of the many reasons why Weezing is a really, really tough Pokemon to use. I think it might have been better on Phil's end to just not have switched out that Weezing, as early as he did, because the problem was that there were just so many turns of Dynamax Azumarill that Phil had to deal with, and once again, if you look at Phil's team, there really wasn't that much damage coming out from it. I would have loved to see maybe a Rotom, base game from the early game where you put on pressure immediately with a nasty plot. But the problem was that, Phil committed the Dynamax to Arcanine, which meant that there was very few good answers against the late game Azumarill.
Yeah, James going to be able to fire off some pretty hefty attacks here as the Tri-Attack comes through, and the Liquidation now in the rain as well. Porygon 2 for Phil might have been able to go for the Recover, but the Recover's not going to be enough if James decides to go for the same set of attacks again.
Yeah, and looks like we're going to see James take a 2-0 victory over Phil in our very first match on the broadcast today.